Screw It, Let's Do It, Lessons in Life by Richard Branson. Picture this. You're completely alone, floating in a tiny capsule, miles above the freezing Atlantic Ocean. Your co-pilot? He just bailed, literally jumped into the churning sea below. And now, without his weight, your hot air balloon is rocketing upward, totally out of control. You're climbing higher and higher into the clouds, with maybe an hour of fuel left. When that runs out, you're going down. The radio's dead. So what do? What thoughts race through your mind in that moment of pure terror? For the guy stuck in that capsule, one thought broke through the panic, a motto that had guided his entire wild life. It wasn't about surrender. It was about possibility. He told himself, while I'm still breathing, I can still make something happen. Something will come through. That guy was Richard Branson. And this nightmare scenario? Just another Tuesday in a life lived on the absolute edge. He's the rebellious billionaire, the thrill seeker, the mastermind behind Virgin, a global empire spanning music, airlines, trains, and yes, even space travel. But here's the real question. How did he pull it off? How does a kid struggling with dyslexia, whose headmaster literally predicted he'd end up either in prison or as a millionaire, managed to achieve something so ridiculously massive? The secret? A simple, bold, and slightly cocky philosophy summed up in 5 words. Screw it, let's do it. This isn't some dry business textbook stuffed with graphs and corporate jargon. This is a guide for actually living. It's packed with raw, unfiltered lessons from a life full of insane risks, spectacular crashes, and jaw-dropping victories. Today, we're diving deep into that philosophy. By the end, you'll get the mindset that turns regular people into game changers. You'll discover why having fun is actually the smartest business move you can make, why obstacles are just growth waiting to happen, and why the most crucial step is always the very first one. This isn't just a book summary. It's a wake-up call to live bigger and bolder. Richard Branson's story doesn't start in some fancy office. It kicks off with a 4-year-old being told by his mom to figure out his own way home across the countryside. Sounds rough, maybe even a bit crazy, right? But for his mother, Eve, this was survival training. She was teaching him to stand on his own, think independently, and see life not as a rule book, but as an obstacle course, begging to be conquered. This became the foundation of everything. Another time, on a freezing winter morning, she woke him up, handed him a packed lunch, and sent him on a 50-mile bike ride to the coast, a journey that would eat up his entire day and night. When he dragged himself back home, exhausted but triumphant, there was no parade. His mom just said, "Well done, Ricky. Now go on, the vicar needs you to chop some logs." The message was crystal clear. Finish one challenge, then immediately hunt for the next. Life is about constant forward motion. This anything's possible if you try attitude? His mother was the living proof. During the war, she wanted to be a pilot, a job completely off limits to women. Did that stop her? Not even close. She threw on a leather jacket, stuffed her hair under a helmet, dropped her voice an octave, and landed the job. Later, when she wanted to become an air hostess but lacked the required Spanish skills and nursing training, she sweet-talked her way onto the list and learned everything on the fly. She never saw obstacles, only creative detours. Her life motto might as well have been the title of this book. Adventure ran in the blood. His granddad's cousin was the legendary explorer Captain Robert Scott, the man who dared to race to the South Pole. Everyone said it was impossible, but Scott believed otherwise. Sure, he came in second and tragically died on the return trip, but he's remembered not for falling short. He's celebrated for his incredible courage. He reached for the impossible and almost grabbed it. These early lessons in guts and independence shaped young Branson. School was a nightmare. Dyslexia turned reading and writing into daily battles, and teachers constantly mistook his struggles for laziness. Instead of accepting defeat, he found a workaround. He trained himself to memorize absolutely everything, developing an ironclad memory that would become one of his secret weapons in business. He refused to let his weakness define him. He transformed it into pure strength. Then, at just 15, he decided to launch a magazine, student magazine. Everyone laughed. He was too young, too inexperienced, too naive. But that voice in his head whispered, "Just do it." He believed it was possible, so he sat down and made it happen. He crunched the numbers for printing and paper, calculated potential income from sales and ads, and with his friend Johnny, spent 2 years writing hundreds of letters to sell advertising space. It beat Latin homework any day, and when that first check for £250 arrived, it proved his belief wasn't just wishful thinking. He knew traditional school wasn't his path, so at 16, he dropped out to work on the magazine full-time, camping out in a London basement. Life became chaotic, wild, and free. It felt like one endless party, but they hustled incredibly hard. He somehow scored interviews with legends like John Lennon and Mick Jagger, giving his scrappy little magazine credibility that rivaled the big dogs. They weren't just having fun. They tackled serious issues like the Vietnam War and genuinely felt they were changing things. This is where a core piece of the Branson philosophy clicks into place. Have fun, work hard, and the money will follow. He never chased wealth. He chased creation, disruption, and genuine enjoyment. When he was passionate and having a blast, success and cash just naturally showed up. If something stopped being fun, he'd dig into why, and if he couldn't fix it, he'd bounce. Life's just too short to be miserable. His first real money-making attempts? Total disasters. At 9, he tried growing and selling Christmas trees, but rabbits devoured all the seedlings. Lesson learned. Money definitely doesn't grow on trees. But he didn't sulk about it. He and his friend turned around and shot those rabbits, sold them to the local butcher, and actually turned a small profit. Even in failure, there was fun and wisdom. From the magazine, the business evolved. They started selling discounted records by mail order. When a postal strike threatened to destroy them, they didn't quit. They pivoted. They opened their first record shop in spare space inside a shoe store and made it the coolest hangout spot for students. One store became 2, then more, and suddenly, before he hit 20, he had a chain of Virgin record stores across the country. The Virgin name itself, pure honesty. They picked it because they were complete virgins in business. It perfectly captured their approach, learning on the fly, breaking conventions, and making their own rules. One of the best examples of this fun-first philosophy, the story of Necker Island. In 1977, needing a break, Branson headed to Jamaica where he had an absolute blast, signing nearly 20 reggae bands, with a suitcase literally stuffed with cash, the perfect mix of work and play. While there, he heard about the Virgin Islands and decided on a whim to check them out. He was basically broke, but he'd learned a clever trick. If you pretend you want to buy an island, you get a free helicopter tour. So he called an estate agent, claimed he was a record company owner scouting locations for a studio, and boom, he and his girlfriend Joan were suddenly being treated like royalty, hopping from one stunning island to the next. It started as a game, but then they saw it, Necker, an untouched, breathtaking island miles from civilization. He fell head over heels instantly. Only one tiny problem. The asking price was £3 million. Branson, never one to hold back, offered £150,000. The agent was not impressed. His final counteroffer was £200,000, and they were promptly kicked out of their complimentary villa. But wait, there's more. On the way home, their connecting flight got canceled. While everyone else wandered around lost and frustrated, Branson spotted an opportunity. He chartered a plane for £2,000, did some quick math, and divided the cost among the stranded passengers. He grabbed a blackboard and scrawled, "Virgin Airways, £39 single flight to Puerto Rico." In that moment of travel chaos, an airline was born. Classic Branson, seeing solutions where everyone else only sees problems, grabbing chances as they fly by. And Necker Island? Months later, he discovered the owner desperately needed £200,000 to build a house. After some negotiating, he bought his dream island for £180,000. Money he didn't actually have but was absolutely convinced he could find. He borrowed from banks, friends, family, whoever would listen, and turned his fantasy into reality. He had fun, took a shot, and eventually, the money came through. This brings us to another critical lesson. Be bold, but don't gamble. There's a huge difference. Gambling is flipping a coin where you have zero control. A bold move is a calculated risk. You've studied the odds, understood the worst-case scenario, and believe you've got a solid shot at winning. The launch of Virgin Atlantic in 1984 was the ultimate bold move. The seed was planted by that chartered flight, but it was inspired by a childhood hero, Freddie Laker, whose budget airline had been crushed by industry giants. When a proposal to start a new transatlantic airline landed on his desk, he was immediately tempted. His gut told him within 60 seconds that this was his destiny. But he didn't just leap blindly. He calculated everything. He tried calling a rival budget airline, People Express, and couldn't get through all day because their lines were constantly jammed. He instantly knew he could do better. Then he called Boeing and negotiated a deal to rent a single jumbo jet for 1 year. He pitched the idea to his partners at Virgin Music. They thought he'd lost his mind, but he'd crunched the numbers. The cost, while massive, was less than a third of the music company's annual profits. If the airline completely tanked, they'd lose serious money, but the parent company would survive. It was an enormous risk, but a calculated one. He sought advice from Freddie Laker himself, who warned him about the dirty tricks British Airways would deploy to crush competition. Laker's wisdom was gold. Don't compete on price alone. Offer superior service. And don't forget the fun. Branson absorbed this completely. Virgin Atlantic launched not just as a cheap airline, but as an experience. It was entertaining, stylish, and treated passengers like actual human beings. And when British Airways did indeed play dirty, trying to destroy his reputation, he remembered Laker's other gem, "Sue the bastards." He took them to court and won. This relentless drive to challenge himself and take on giants became his signature. The same spirit led him to challenge British Rail, launching Virgin trains after being inspired by bullet trains in Japan. Again, everyone predicted failure. Again, he proved them spectacularly wrong, eventually producing the world's most advanced tilting train. Of course, these bold moves weren't limited to business. For Branson, the ultimate rush comes from physical challenges, pushing his body and spirit to absolute breaking points. His powerboat attempts to cross the Atlantic and win the Blue Riband are legendary tales of pure persistence. On the first try, his boat sank just 60 miles from the finish. He didn't quit. 6 years later, he was back with a new boat. During that second attempt, seawater contaminated the fuel tanks and killed the engines. The crew was ready to throw in the towel. They were exhausted, seasick, and completely demoralized. But Branson refused to accept it. He rallied them, shouting, "Come on, we've got to do it, let's try." Somehow, impossibly, they got the engines roaring again and beat the record by just over 2 hours. The lesson burned into his soul: never, ever give up. The day after this victory, a balloonist named Per Lindstrand approached him with an even crazier challenge: cross the Atlantic in a hot air balloon. No one had ever done it. It was insane, dangerous, and absolutely irresistible. He said yes. Screw it, let's do it. This is the adventure that left him alone in the sky. After Per jumped, Branson drifted north toward Scotland. But his preparation saved him. His training, his unshakable faith, and his refusal to panic kept him alive until a rescue helicopter appeared. He'd stared down death and walked away with even more lessons. Prepare thoroughly, trust yourself completely, and support each other. Did that near-death experience stop him? Are you kidding? A few years later, he and Purda decided to cross the much bigger Pacific Ocean. This trip was even more terrifying. They nearly got ripped apart entering the jet stream, accidentally dropped 2 full fuel tanks, and shot up to a deadly 42,500 feet, where the capsule was on the verge of exploding. At one point, fireballs of burning gas started raining around them, and only a desperate, crazy maneuver to fly into oxygen-starved altitude saved them from burning alive. They finally crash-landed in a blizzard on a frozen lake in the Canadian Arctic, 200 times the size of Britain. As they waited for rescue, suffering from frostbite, Per turned to him and said, "Next time, we'll fly around the world." For Branson, these challenges are life itself. They're what force us to evolve. As he puts it, if you challenge yourself, you will grow, your life will change, your outlook will be positive. Underneath everything, the businesses, the adventures, the risks, is a deep, rock-solid belief in family and friends. He describes Virgin as one big family, and this idea of teamwork and loyalty comes straight from his childhood. When he wanted to buy the old manor house for his first recording studio, he was £10,000 short. The bank had given him a loan, his parents had handed over his trust fund early, but it still wasn't enough. It was his Auntie Joyce, the same aunt who bet him he couldn't learn to swim, who provided the final £7,500. "What's money for anyway?" she told him. "It's to make things happen." It wasn't until years later that he discovered she didn't have the money to spare. She'd taken out a mortgage on her own home because she had that much faith in him. This loyalty flows both ways. He believes in being fair in all dealings and protecting your reputation at all costs. Early in his career, he made a massive mistake. He devised a scheme to dodge taxes on records by pretending to export them, thinking it was just bending the rules. He got greedy and got caught, ending up in an actual prison cell. Lying on that plastic mattress, he felt the full weight of his headmaster's prophecy. It was a turning point. He vowed never to cross that line again. His mother put up their family home to post his bail, and her trust in him, even after he'd failed so badly, was a powerful wake-up call. He paid back every penny of the massive fine, and from that day forward made honesty and fairness non-negotiable. As he says, "Your reputation is everything." Finally, there's the principle of doing some good. From his earliest days with Student Magazine, he wanted to use his platform to change the world, even in small ways. As his wealth and influence exploded, so did his ability to help. The most dramatic example came during the First Gulf War. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, he saw the refugee crisis unfolding on TV and called his friend, King Hussein of Jordan, asking how he could help. He organized a jumbo jet packed with 40,000 blankets and supplies to fly to Jordan. But he didn't stop there. When he saw Saddam Hussein using British citizens as human shields, he felt compelled to act. Using his unique position as a friend of the Jordanian royal family, one of the few channels Saddam trusted, he organized a mission. He bravely flew into Baghdad, risking his own life and his only airplane, and successfully negotiated the hostages' release. It was a moment of absolute clarity. He realized that as a businessman, he had unique access to power and could make a genuine difference on the world stage. This is the complete circle of this screw it, let's do it philosophy. It starts with personal challenges, builds into daring business ventures fueled by passion and joy, rests on a foundation of family and respect, and ultimately leads to a life of purpose, where success becomes a tool for good. It's a journey from learning to swim in a river to rescuing hostages from a war zone, all guided by the same simple, audacious belief. If you want to do something, just do it. As we zoom out and look at Richard Branson's life, what's the single most powerful takeaway? It's not just about risk-taking or entrepreneurship. It's about fundamentally rewiring how you see the world. Most people hit a wall and stop dead. Branson hits a wall and immediately looks for a way over, under, around, or straight through it. His entire existence proves that the biggest obstacles we face are usually the ones we construct in our own heads. That tiny word, can't, simply doesn't exist in his vocabulary. And what makes his message so incredibly relevant, especially if you're younger, is that this isn't some genetic gift. It's a skill you develop. It started with his mother giving him manageable challenges, forcing him to rely on himself. He learned to swim by getting thrown in a river. He started a magazine by making calls from a school payphone. He launched an airline because his flight got canceled. Every single time, he took one small, decisive action in response to a problem. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for perfect conditions. He just did it. The other brilliant lesson here is about fun. We're constantly told that work has to be serious, that grinding and suffering are badges of honor. Branson completely rejects this nonsense. He built a music empire, an airline, a worldwide brand, all while having the absolute time of his life. He demonstrates that passion and enjoyment aren't distractions from success. They're the rocket fuel. When you genuinely love what you do, you work harder, think more creatively, and bounce back faster when things fall apart. Money, he teaches, is just a side effect of a life lived with joy and meaning. So how can you start using this mindset right now? You don't need to cross oceans in a balloon. It starts small. First, identify one thing you've been telling yourself you can't do. Maybe it's learning guitar, trying out for a team, or starting a small side project. Break it down into the tiniest possible first step. Don't obsess about the finish line. Just take that single step. As the ancient philosopher Plato wisely said, the beginning is the most important part of any work. Second, inject fun into your daily grind. If there's a task you absolutely dread, find a way to gamify it. Blast your favorite music while studying. Turn a boring chore into a speed challenge. Shift your mindset from "I have to do this" to "I get to figure out how to make this enjoyable." It's a small mental flip that can transform your entire experience. And finally, remember what his Auntie Joyce said: money is for making things happen. You've got resources, your time, your energy, your creativity. Use them to create momentum, not just for yourself, but for others. Do some good, even in tiny ways. Help a friend. Volunteer for something you believe in, or simply be the person who brings positive energy wherever you go. That was a summary of Screw It, Let's Do It by Richard Branson. We've covered the highlights today, but here's the truth. A summary is just a map. The real transformation happens when you explore the territory yourself. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or simple phrase hits you in a way you never expected. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book deserves your time. If anything we discussed today sparked something inside you, grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about absorbing information. It's an experience that can genuinely shift how you see yourself and what's possible. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if this summary added value to your day, I'd really appreciate it if you'd smash that like button and subscribe to Billionaire's Bookshelf. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another mind-expanding book. Let's keep challenging ourselves and growing together.